Church, this is Pastor Jeremy again. Just want to take a couple moments of your day and just continue to encourage you in this season of the church and the world that we are currently living in. It wasn't long ago that I had this verse kind of dropped into my spirit as it seems that I'm continuously having the opportunity and privilege to counsel people in their relationships, but also counsel them through the processes of life and the processes of the kingdom. I always say this, that you can try to bypass the process, but the process will never bypass you. What does that mean? I think that just means that there are things that the Lord wants to do in our lives, and there are times when He uses other people to accomplish that work. But there also are times when we have to recognize that part of the process that the Lord has taken us through may mean that those people that He has joined us together with may not walk with us forever. That doesn't mean that the relationship is broken. That doesn't mean that it cannot be redeemed. It just means that the Lord is making a move and we need to remain in Him. And this is a word that many of us know, but we don't preach very often. But I just want to encourage you with it today from John chapter 15. This is Jesus, and He's speaking to His disciples, and it's not long before He's going to go and return to the right hand of the Father. And He's preaching this from His own process. He's preaching this as revelation from His own experience in relationship with His Father in heaven. He says that I am the true vine and my Father is the gardener. He cuts off every branch in me that bears no fruit, while every branch that does bear fruit, He prunes so that it will bear even more fruit. It says later in verse 4, it says that you need to remain in me and I will remain in you, and no branch can bear fruit by itself. It must remain in the vine. Neither can you bear fruit unless you remain in me. And in verse 5, Jesus says this. He says, I am the vine and you are the branches. He says, if you remain in me and I in you, you will bear much fruit. Apart from me, you can do nothing. And if you do not remain in me, you are like a branch that is thrown away and withers. Such branches are picked up and thrown into the fire and burned. But if you remain in me, my words will remain in you. Ask whatever you wish, and it will be done. This is for my Father's glory, so that you may bear much fruit, showing yourselves to be my disciples. And he goes down and he talks about that fruit of remaining in the Lord is actually a fruit of righteousness that will bear the fruit of the Spirit: love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, gentleness, self-control. But I remember about probably 10 or 12 years ago, probably more like 12, I remember that there was a season in my life where this verse became my anchor. I was transitioning from one job to another, and in that transition, things didn't go as I thought they would go, and fear crept in. And I remember trying to return to a job that I had moved away from, and that door was no longer open for me. And in that season, I just felt so lost. I was so confused. I didn't know what the Lord had for me. In fact, I believed the lie of Satan that he had rejected me. But my father, who's the minister down in Cumberland, Maryland, gave me a book, and it talked about the process of pruning, and how there are seasons in our life where the Lord needs to cut away certain things so that the new of God, the destinies of God that He has spoken over our lives, can actually have room to grow in and flourish and produce fruit. And I realized after walking through that season that the Lord had pruned that job, that season of my life out to make room for what God wanted to do, not only around me and for me, but most importantly within me. And I just want to encourage you today that it says here there's an order to the process. Jesus is saying that He is the true vine. God is the gardener. He's the one that makes the decision. The Father in heaven makes the decision on what stays and what goes. But even Jesus has to remain. The Father is the gardener. Jesus is the vine. But we are the branches. We are subject to the pruning. And we will remain. We will produce fruit. We will see what God has shown us, as long as we continue to trust him and we trust the vine dresser. And so I don't know what you're going through today. It may be a relationship that needs to be pruned away, and so that something new can come into your life. Maybe you're at the end of a season in your job responsibilities, and God's calling you out. Maybe God's not pruning you at all. Maybe he's testing you to see if you have the faith to remain. A lot of us are real herky-jerky when it comes to uncertainty. And we live in a season of uncertainty. We live in a world of uncertainty. But there is one thing that's certain, is that God is good, and he's good all the time. And if we're certain of that, then we have the ability in faith to trust him and remain in him. And he promises, and God is 100% faithful. He is undefeated in keeping his promises, as long as we choose to remain. I just heard a pastor say this. He said, "We celebrate the faith to begin new things, but we very rarely celebrate the faith to stay." I want to encourage you today. If God is pruning you, there is one place that you need to remain, and that is faithful in your relationship to him, in your ability to trust him, and your ability to see that there is something outside of your scope. And so you can retreat back and fall into his arms and into his yoke, because his burden is easy and his yoke is light. And so we want to bless you today. Remain in him. If he's pruning you, it's for something greater to come. God is good like that. He will never bring you out of a good season to take you into a worse. That worst season is just a developing season, a learning season, a growing season, so that he can take you from glory to glory. And so trust him in this season. Remain in him, and he will remain in you. God bless you.